Tonight on Newshour, France faces yet another political and economic storm. Prime Minister François Bayrou has lost a confidence vote just 9 months after coming to office, becoming the fourth premier to fall under President Emmanuel Macron's second term. His departure underscores the turbulence inside the National Assembly, where divided parties have repeatedly blocked budgets and reforms. At the heart of this crisis is France's mounting debt. Public borrowing now stands at more than 114% of GDP, one of the highest levels in Europe, with a deficit of over 5% last year. Now, Bayrou sought to impose 44 billion euros worth of cuts, describing the nation as being on life support and addicted to spending. But those plans proved deeply unpopular, and like his predecessor, he's been forced out before seeing those plans through. Now, Macron is confronted with unenviable choices, appointing a fifth prime minister in under 2 years, or risking fresh elections that could hand even more power to hostile opposition. With calls for reform, warnings of market pressure and the shadow of the 2027 presidential race, France is at a crossroads. We begin with our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris.
Well, Guy, it's the morning after the night before. People across France waking up to the news that another Prime Minister has been ousted from office. François Bayrou formally submitting his resignation to Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday. And as you can imagine, it's dominating the newspaper headlines. Here we have Libération, one of the main dailies, saying super Trump, so super thrashing or super hiding what François Bayrou suffered in Parliament on Monday. The numbers there, 194 lawmakers voting in favour of him and his government, 364 voting to kick the Prime Minister and his government out of office. We also have Le Parisien, which is another big daily, saying au pied du mur, so at the foot of the wall or up against it is the sense of this headline. You can see the president there pictured with the outgoing Prime Minister. This newspaper is saying that France has been once again plunged into uncertainty. It's up to Emmanuel Macron to find a way out of this crisis. Now, the presidential office has said that Emmanuel Macron wants to appoint a new Prime Minister in the next few days. Some of the runners and riders who could replace François Bayrou, the socialists are arguing that it should be someone from the left. The Green Party also say it's time for a left-wing Prime Minister. If Emmanuel Macron wants to choose somebody from his own camp, though, the centrist alliance, it could be the Defence Minister. Perhaps Sébastien Lecornu has been named as somebody who might be able to bridge the gap between left and right. But if Emmanuel Macron wants to go even further to the right, there's the populist party, the National Rally, with their figurehead Marine Le Pen. It might not be her, however. It could be her 29-year-old protégé, a man called Jordan Bardella, who might be the nomination from that party. Whoever Emmanuel Macron chooses is going to have a very tricky time delivering a budget through Parliament, trying to find billions of dollars worth of savings before the end of the year. Also, there's no small matter, tomorrow there will be a national shutdown, the protest movement on the 10th of September. We're expecting industrial action across the country, walkouts at schools, hospitals, on the railways, at airports, people being urged not to go to work, the public being urged to try to withdraw their money from the banks to put more pressure on the financial system. Whatever happens on Wednesday, all of this, the political crisis and the economic crisis, is certainly putting more pressure on the President, Emmanuel Macron.
Now let's take a look at how some of those left-wing lawmakers that Ross mentioned have responded.
Left-wing lawmakers claimed victory after French Prime Minister François Bayrou's government fell to a vote of confidence on Monday, September 8th, deepening a political crisis and handing President Emmanuel Macron the task of finding a fifth Prime Minister in less than 2 years. Boris Vallaud, the leader of the Socialists in the Parliament, said Bayrou's budget proposals had been take it or leave it, and he had called the confidence vote as an exit strategy. Vallaud said France needed to find ways to bring down the debt while sparing working people.
Dans l'été, c'était le grand silence.
In the summer, there was a great silence after presenting a budget on July 15th that we understood was essentially a take-it-or-leave-it budget. During the summer, the Prime Minister was not preparing the budget, he was preparing his departure, and basically, he wanted it to be as it happened today. We took advantage of this moment of expression in the chamber to remind everyone that, contrary to what the Prime Minister was saying, there was another path. A path that is not indifferent to the issue of deficits and debt, but which chooses to spare those who have only their work to live on, to support their purchasing power, where they were promised additional efforts, even unbearable sacrifices for those for whom the end of the month is not on the 30th, but on the 15th.
De les soutenir dans leur pouvoir d'achat, là où...
Leaders of the left-wing France Unbowed, LFI, and the Greens said respectively there needed to be a break with the past, with the LFI's Mathilde Panot calling for Macron to resign.
We demand that Emmanuel Macron leave. Understand that we have a problem if the country finds itself every 3 months with a government that will fall. You understand that it is not possible to wait until 2027 to have such instability that, since the President refuses to recognise the 2024 legislative election results, he appoints people one by one who are responsible for always implementing the same policies. We do not agree with that. Yes, we will not govern in a grand coalition. We will not participate in the shenanigans that are currently being carried out to be able to continue a policy that no one wants in the country. We will not participate in any government that does not carry a programme of rupture, and, as I reiterated today, the Unbowed will not sell themselves out for a place in ministries.
We need a political break with Macronism, it's essential. But this political break comes from the left, and it comes from changing things now, from being able to work now on the issue of salaries, building renovations, climate objectives. And so if the left is called upon to govern, it must be able to do so, and it must be the whole left. And after the president's impeachment, well, the question is, will he at some point demonstrate that he is no longer a sticking point? That's the question.
C'est ça la question.
Marc Fesneau from Bayrou's centrist democratic movement said the French people were calling on political parties to work together to make progress on the country's problems.
I also regret that in the afternoon we heard a lot of insults, a lot of outrageousness, that all of this does not build what we have long called our votes. What the French people on the ground are saying, what they are all telling us in the constituencies is, get along, talk to each other, try to resolve the problems before us, the debt and the others. I have not to date seen the elements do so. However, there is no absolute majority emerging in the National Assembly.
Bayrou, 74, took office as Prime Minister only 9 months ago. He will tender his resignation on Tuesday, September 9th, his office said, leaving Macron to face a narrowing set of options, with financial markets signalling worry at France's political and fiscal crisis.
OK, let's bring in Pascal Massenau, a geopolitical analyst, joining us also from Paris for a more in-depth analysis on those underlying problems. Pascal, very good to see you. Thank you for joining us. How much of France's political instability then is directly linked to Macron's gamble on last year's snap election?
Well, I would thank you for your invitation. I would say that Macron is fully responsible for this situation because the soul in the parliament, the National Assembly, was useless last year. So it's for its own and strictly personal wish had made this decision. And this is not what the people was expecting. And this is the beginning of the big problem where we are living nowadays.
And 4 prime ministers in 2 years, we'll soon be welcoming number 5. What signal does that give us about the health of French politics, France's parliamentary system in general?
I hardly hear you, but well, so I see in the bottom of the screen. Well, so the situation with so many prime ministers within a few months is very annoying because it makes weakness to the French power within Europe and on the international scene theater, and so this is a very bad news. Well, so today Bayrou resigned, and maybe Le Cornu being appointed as prime minister, and he might resign by October after the forecasting budget discussed.
And let's look at the economic side a little bit more now. Public debt now at 114% of GDP. Just how severe is France's fiscal crisis, Pascal, compared to other Eurozone economies?
Well, the problem is that we are up to the maximum authorized by the European treaties, which is 3% of deficit, and we're now from 5 to 8%, which is higher than the average debt of European countries. On the other side, this debt is owned by foreign institutions, banks and states, mainly the Qatar. And so this makes also a weakness of the French responsibility, the French power. And this we are fearing, it hasn't been said in your report, but we are fearing on Friday the note of France in terms of financial and economic results being dropped by the international analysis agencies.
And in terms,
this is very bad news.
Pascal, in terms of that work needed to try and sort out these problems, I mean, Bayrou himself pushed 44 billion euros worth of cuts. Would those measures have been enough to steady the public finances, do you think, were they to have been adopted?
This is not enough at first, but the way Bayrou made his calculation to get these 44 billions has been not very professional, and it made anger towards the population, because most of the decision to get 1 billion one side and 2 billion those side were very unpopular, and this is probably one of the reasons he had to resign from Prime Minister said. And this formerly the cuts in the budget ought to be done, and more than 44 billions a year. But this has to be made on a larger policy, economic and financial policy. And for the time being, and regarding the situation at the Parliament, it is not possible to make such a long revolution, I should say.
Speaking of policy, unpopular policy, although perhaps with different parts of the population, tax rises instead of cuts have been put forward by many of the opposition parties as an alternative suggestion. Could higher taxation, do you think, realistically solve this deficit problem?
Yes, taxation, upper taxation is no more tolerable for everybody, from the richest to the most in difficulty. And because there are the tax on all things we are consuming, and the only thing which is not taxes for the time being is the air we are breathing. But now people are fed up with all these taxes, and there are more and more people who have difficulties to live. And the higher life level people are thinking of moving away from France. with their money, and even just to live correctly, not to be taxes on everything. This is a big problem here in France, is all those taxes on all ways, and these taxes are not equal to everybody. And that's the reason why it makes not only an economical, but also a very hard social crisis that we will see the effect tomorrow.
And Emmanuel Macron, not for the first time in his presidency, has to make some difficult choices. He must pick now either a new PM or call fresh elections. Which options do you think offers the least disruption to France's economy?
Very hard to say, but the primary studies are very bad, and there is a risk of collapsing of banking system, and all the saving of people being wrapped by the government, and this makes a very high tension. So Macron doesn't know at the time being if he has only to appoint a new prime minister or to make a bigger decision. It means to go back to the polling station for new election. But what is not said in your report is that most of the parties, and especially the ultra-left and the National Rally, are thinking mainly to the next election, which will take a date on March next year, for the cities, the municipalities. And so they have a big target in these elections, and that's the reason why they don't want a new legislative term, and they prefer to go to this election and to ask, it has been said properly, to ask for Macron himself to resign.
Well, let's just finally, Pascal, just look ahead to a year after that, 2027. Do you think Macron still has any real room left to restore economic credibility before the next presidential contest?
No way. No way. No, is now granted by 15% of people supporting him. So it's over. And even some who have been supporting him in the past, especially during his first term, are saying that he has to get out, to resign.
Well, very stark analysis. We do thank you very much indeed for joining us from Paris and for sharing your analysis with us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that does bring us to the end of this edition of Newshour. France once again then finds itself mired in political uncertainty, with its economic challenges growing sharper by the day. The question now is whether Macron can steady the ship or whether France is destined for yet more turmoil. From all of us here at A News, thanks for being with us.